about a minute late. But thanks everyone. As you know, we partner with Homebase to put on these types of trainings. And if you were able to attend part one, that was great. But this is part two, focused on housing stability and kind of current climate in light of everything going on right now for rapid rehousing. So thanks for being here today. Also wanted to mention I'm joined by two other HSA staff. So Jen Tran is on the call, and then Matthew Hayes is also on. So we're just here to observe and listen and answer any questions from our end. But with that, I'll pass it back to Homebase to get started.
Thank you, Lodi. So again, thank you for joining us for part two of our ESG Rapid Rehousing Training Series, Housing Stability Strategies for Our Current Climate. Your presenters today are myself, Bila Lindner, and my colleague Eli Hamilton. We are from Homebase. Homebase is a nonprofit organization that provides technical assistance and training to HSA and housing and homeless services providers in San Mateo County, such as yourselves. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I wanted to give you all a couple of tech reminders. So the first one is that we are recording this training. The recording and the slides will be made available to you later on. The recording itself will be on our YouTube channel, which we will send out the link to. And you all were muted upon entry to the training, and we ask that you stay muted for the time being, unless you're speaking up to ask a question or to participate in an activity. And if you have a technical issue for whatever reason, please feel free to use the chat box to message us. Please also feel free to use the chat box to ask us any questions that you have. I also want to note that I think we do have closed captioning available as well, and you can access that by clicking on the live transcript button. So at this point, it would be really great if everyone could go ahead and show us how you use your chat box by putting in your name, your agency, and telling us what is your favorite breakfast. So just a little quick icebreaker for y'all. I'm gonna do that myself. All right. So again, some pretty wide variety here. Eli's favorite is chicken and rice. That's very interesting. All right.
Any type of chicken and rice combination I'll eat for breakfast.
Oh yeah. I'm seeing a lot of eggs. I'm seeing a lot of waffles. I'm seeing French toast. Yes, that's my favorite. I haven't had it for a while, but it's pretty good. Bacon, just bacon. That's legitimate as well. And all of these are legitimate. Yeah, chilaquiles. Very nice. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. Yeah.
Just the word bacon and the word waffles always make me feel hungry instantly.
Yeah.
It's unfair.
Yeah, and maybe this wasn't the best question to ask so close to lunchtime, but anyway, thank you for putting it out there for us. All right, so I guess moving on to the next slide. All right, so as the title of this training suggests, today we're going to focus on ways you can help your clients maintain long-term stable housing. And our objectives for today's training are for you to learn promising practices that'll help you keep your clients housed after program support ends, to connect and learn from other ESG rapid rehousing providers, and to help you think about and identify practices and strategies that you or your organization might improve upon. Right. And here is our agenda for today. First, we're going to define housing stability together. Then we're going to talk about early housing stability strategies at move-in. Then we're going to move to the work that you'll do with your client while they're participating in the program to put down roots and develop support systems. And finally, we're going to talk about ensuring ongoing housing stability as you wind down programmatic support, sort of towards the end of your working with your client. And then lastly, we're going to have an activity, which is hopefully going to help you reflect on areas where you can improve your work on these issues. So what is housing stability? Why are we here today? What are we talking about? So we're going to talk about what we mean by housing stability so that we're all on the same page. So housing stability means that when permanent housing has ended the crisis of homelessness. That's basically the first part, right? Your client has ended that crisis. They're no longer experiencing homelessness because they've obtained permanent housing. It also occurs when that permanent housing is stable because your client has the resources and the capacity to maintain that housing. So that means that they're going to be able to afford to pay rent on time, and be able to pay rent on time, follow the terms of their lease, and meet any other housing requirements necessary to stay housed. Just a quick note and word that I think is really important is that housing stability is not solving all of your clients' problems. This is an important point because obviously you really care about your clients. Your clients may be facing many, many issues. And you might really want to try to help them solve as many of those issues as possible. But since you are a case manager who's very busy and you have many clients, you're going to need to be able to tell the difference between an issue that threatens housing stability and one that doesn't, so that you can really focus in on those issues with your client that may put them at risk of experiencing homelessness again, and so that you don't get overwhelmed by all the potential issues that might arise in your client's life. Okay, next slide. All right, so now we're going to talk about housing stability strategies at move-in. So those early strategies that you can use to lay a foundation for your client to be successful in their new home. All right, so the first one is supporting your client's moving process. So literally your client is entering a brand new place with new people. It might be shared housing, it might not be shared housing, but it's a new place, it's a new environment, and they may be apprehensive. Anyone who's moved before, knows exactly what I'm talking about. And you have a very important role that you can play here in helping sort of allay some of their concerns. And some things that you can do to help them might be like role playing, meeting with their landlord and neighbors. So helping them think about what are they going to say about themselves and their past? Are there things that they are going to want to bring up that they want people to know? Are there things that they are going to want to keep private? How are they going to talk about these things? And also helping them think through if they want to have a relationship with their neighbors. Some people don't want to do that. Just kind of upfront talking to them about the fact that, neighbor relationships are a particular kind of relationship, and it's helpful to sort of like talk about what the expectations are in that kind of situation where you're in a building, with a bunch of other people, if they haven't lived on their own before in an apartment building, for example. Another thing that can be really helpful with stabilizing clients is helping them sort of get the lay of the land in their neighborhood. So you might tour the neighborhood with them. If you want to do that so that they know where things are, you could take them around physically to show them where things are, like public transportation, the library, groceries, the pharmacy, like all of the things that they might need to access. You might also print a map for them if they're comfortable reading maps, if that's helpful for them to hold on to. And then another thing that I think is sometimes overlooked is helping make sure that your clients are like physically comfortable in their new spaces. So asking them like, what kinds of things would you like to have in your unit to make you feel comfortable? Like, is this a certain kind of lighting? Like, how do you feel about noise? Would like a noise machine help you? Just sort of like literally making people feel at home can make them feel a lot more stable in their new unit. And another really important thing you can do is help prepare your clients for bumps in the road, right? Because things are going to come up in housing for most of your clients, and getting ahead of issues is always going to be really, really important. So we recommend that you might work with your client to identify like the top 2 to 3 potential challenges that might arise and troubleshoot those in advance. Think about what's the issue, who are they going to call first, what exactly are they going to do, what steps are they going to take to like address those top 2 to 3 challenges that they might anticipate. And another thing that can be really helpful is having a crisis plan in place for really serious issues that could threaten someone's, well-being. So coming up with a really detailed step-by-step plan together to figure out what they should do if something major happens, such as like a very serious health issue, a mental health crisis, or some other serious concern that could arise. And I think it's probably a good idea to put this up like on the refrigerator or by the phone, just someplace that's like really easy for your client to access. Okay. Obviously, you're going to want to stay in close contact with your client. I think a good rule of thumb is to schedule a follow-up visit really soon after their move-in date. So ideally like 2 to 3 days for move-in. And the reason for that is that the first few days to week to month of moving into a new place for folks can be a really, really difficult transition. They might feel lonely. They may feel overwhelmed, and seeing a friendly face, seeing someone who's helped them through this process and sort of knows them can be really make a huge difference, and also sends them the message that even though they moved into housing, like you're still there to support them. And so they're more likely then to reach out to you if they have concerns later on. Posting your contact information in several visible places is a good idea. Setting up a regular check-in appointment and setting up like a reminder system for those appointments can be good. Sending clients letters, emails, texts, helping them set phone alarms, like that kind of thing, because sometimes people have trouble remembering meetings. I'm one of those people. I often have several alarms on my phone at any given point in time. And especially right now in the current climate that we're in with COVID-19, making sure that your client has like whatever tech that they might need to help them connect with you remotely is also going to be really important as well. Let's just see if there are any other chats. Okay, mostly French toast and egg related. Okay, good. No questions so far. All right. Okay, so one more thing is providing tenant education and supports to ensure lease compliance. Leases are very, very overwhelming and complicated. You look at them, you think, do I have to follow all these things? What does this mean? So sometimes it can be really, really helpful to make do's and don'ts lists for your clients of the main common like lease violations or things that you might be concerned that they need help understanding. You might want to practice responses to complaints from other tenants or requests for a repair. So going over with them, okay, let's say that your water is leaking. Like, what are you going to do? Who are you going to call? What are you going to say? If your neighbor knocks on the door and says you're being a little bit too loud, how are you going to respond to that? So sort of helping them think through how to make sure that they're complying with the lease requirements and also enforcing their rights under the lease, like asking for repairs and things like that. We also recommend that you remain up to date on any particular rights that people have right now during COVID, because there are some special rights that renters have. Certain like eviction moratoria and things that landlords can and can't do at this time. We recommend that you also stay up to date on those things so that you know about those as well, and you can educate your clients about them as well. Okay, next slide, please. All right, connecting with the landlord. This is one other housing stability strategy that's important at move-in, but that's going to be true like throughout the entire time you're working with your client. And engaging with landlords, we actually have a whole training on it. It's super important. I'm sure you guys hear about it all the time, the importance of really building that trust and relationship with landlords. So a key part of that is right up front, providing a landlord with a responsive contact at your agency. So this is really critical, because if the landlord feels like they can come to you first before filing papers with a court or calling the police or doing any of the other things that they might do, that gives you an opportunity to intervene before issues get too out of hand and your client loses their housing stability. You also just want to let them know that they can reach out with any questions or concerns big or small. You want to get them, give them the sense that, you know, you're really available to them, sort of, you know, with any kind of question that they have. They don't have to wait until it's a crisis, in other words, to really reach out to you. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Eli.
Great. Thanks, Bila. And again, if you something comes up while we're presenting that you want to hear more about, if you have a question, either a clarifying question or that reminds me I'm interested in this topic question, put it in the chat. And yeah, Melissa, collaboration is key, absolutely. Making sure everybody's on the same page. We're going to talk a little bit now about housing stability during program participation. So continuing on that work after you've sort of worked with your client as best you both can to set up for housing stability from the beginning. What are things that you're doing with the client while they're housed in the program? So these three sort of buckets of concepts that we're going to discuss are not, I think, probably going to be new to anybody. And if they are, they're probably going to be very intuitive and make a lot of sense. The three sort of areas we're going to talk about are connecting clients and making sure clients are thinking about the types of social supports that they might want, community-based social supports. We'll talk about a little bit more about what that means. Financial resources, obviously, this is key, and we know that that this type of like financial resources, things to increase income, are one of the hugest obstacles that you and your clients are working with. And then advocacy and legal assistance. What are the challenges that fall in the realm of either things that need legal support or things that need a little bit more specialized advocacy? So, links to community-based social supports. These are some of the resources in the community that we at Homebase at least often talk about, that we tend not to talk about specifically, right? When we're talking about connecting clients to resources, that can often be employment support, job training, education, childcare. But one of the things that we see in long-term housing stability or medium-term housing stability is the importance of community. So whether that is connecting to a faith community, if your client is, connects with that, if your client is looking for that, or identity-based communities, LGBTQ spaces, cultural organizations in the community. Age-based programming, so things like programming at senior centers, or programming targeting aging adults, programs for children and youth that provide the specific developmental, social activities that are good for children and youth. Things like nutrition, education, and counseling, and support groups. Support groups is very general, but things like recovery supports, things like support groups for survivors. All of these things can be really supportive in the way that family connections can be really supportive if those exist, or friend groups can be really supportive. I know you all recognize this, but we wanted to call this out in the slide because it's not usually seen as meeting the direct needs of a client for stability, but can be really, really important in rapid rehousing for that long-term stability. And then, of course, there is this incredibly important financial resources piece, which is incredibly broad. I mean, we have done in San Mateo whole trainings where we focus just on increasing income, right? We recognize there's a lot that you're doing here. And also, it's important to remember that this can be incredibly broad. So looking with a client at their needs and their budget, from the perspective of, okay, what are the different ways that you can meet these needs and fill in pieces of your budget? Definitely increasing someone's cash income is a very important piece of that, particularly in the Bay Area, right? Whether that is through enrollment in benefits that the client is eligible for but isn't getting, or exploring, are there ways that this client is being underpaid their benefits, which does sometimes happen, or whether that's through things like education or employment training and connections and job application support. But it can also be through food assistance, right? It can be through, can we find a way for you to meet some of your food needs without having to spend your income? It can be through transit subsidies, utility subsidies, all of those little pieces that you as case managers are responsible for knowing about and filling in, right? That whole universe of expenses that folks are facing. And then again, I think it's important right now, obviously, to think about what income has your client been eligible for related to the COVID-19 assistance, understanding and helping folks know how to get their the checks, the direct cash assistance checks from the federal government, and also understanding when those things are going to go away, right? How much of a client's current income and access to resources is COVID dependent, and how much of it is going to go away and when? So when we talk about knowing, it's good to know this stuff about COVID time resources. If you have questions about any of the COVID specific stuff that's happening, whether that is the certain tenant protections that may have existed and may be going away, COVID-19, the financial assistance that's available, it's possible that we might have resources covering those things, one-pager summaries on the Homebase website. So if you do ever right now, or as you're thinking about this, have questions about any of the framework of COVID assistance, feel free to reach out and we'll see if we have something that can clarify. Okay, so financial resources, assistance with increasing income. And then we want to also call out the importance of connecting clients to whatever advocacy or legal supports they may need, and talking to the client about those barriers and helping to identify the sort of legal and advocacy resources. And definitely this includes just like traditional legal assistance with things like eviction prevention, or family law, criminal record expungement, attorneys that specialize in immigration processes or refugee processes, whatever the client might need in their specific legal barriers. But it also includes, we want to expand the concept of advocacy support and think about things like, are there tenants union organizations in the area that support the protection of tenant rights? Are there advocacy groups like Project Sentinel that they're a legal service provider? They also provide information about tenants' rights and can do a lot of the sort of tenant advocacy stuff. Knowing who the organizations in the community are who are doing community advocacy for particular populations. So who are the organizations in the community who are doing community connected? Great question, Marissa. The organization I just mentioned was Project Sentinel. Thank you, Bila. I know there's folks on the call who know a lot more about Project Sentinel than me, but we'll have a peer sharing at the end and maybe folks can share. Yeah, great. So I want to encourage folks and think about this for the peer sharing piece as well. One of the activities at the end of the training that we're going to do is asking you all what you want to hear about from your colleagues on the call. And so if you have specific things that I'm bringing up, you're like, oh, I don't know the organizations in my community that do that. Maybe someone else on this call does. What I've been about to say for like 5 minutes is I would encourage you to identify the organizations in your community that do things like community-based advocacy and community-based services for specific populations. So who in the community, either in San Mateo County or more broadly in the area, are working on advocacy with immigrant populations? Who is doing advocacy with particular cultural groups? Who is doing advocacy with people who are survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, intimate partner violence, right? And those community-based organizations, even if they're small and may not be able to provide direct services or support to your client, may be really excited to be a resource in some of the barriers that you're working through, right? So maybe somebody doesn't have an employment services counselor who can work with your client, but maybe they do have a better understanding of how to overcome some of the barriers to income for undocumented clients. And they might be available for a 30-minute check-in call just to download, right? So identifying those sources of expertise in the community is something we definitely encourage. And in addition, of course, all of the knowing who legal assistance providers are in the community. We recognize right now we've seen both our legal assistance providers, our legal aid providers, and our mental health, behavioral health providers just be incredibly inundated during the pandemic. And we've heard from multiple communities that legal aid providers are even more overwhelmed than normal, and it can be hard to get calls back. So I know that a lot of agencies are thinking about, well, how can I get my clients' legal support needs met in other ways? Some things that people have, I'm hearing folks talk about and would encourage you all to explore if you're having trouble with legal assistance is, are there law firms in the area that are looking for a pro bono relationship? So is there a law firm, a lot of private law firms have a certain number of pro bono hours that they want their attorneys to be doing. And sometimes they do struggle to just know who needs that free legal support. That comes with its own challenges. You might be working with attorneys that don't actually work with your clients usually. And so could be some education of the attorneys there about how to appropriately support clients, but it is a resource sometimes. So doing some like law firm engagement and like you do landlord engagement to see who might be interested in that. Sometimes law schools have legal clinics where law students might be able to do some of that light touch support. So some ideas. Okay. Yes, and then tips. So again, just knowing what's out there is one of the big barriers and challenges you all are always trying to overcome. Resource lists can be really helpful. We know that the work of a resource list is to keep it updated. So having a list and a process in place to keep that resource list updated is a big helpful strategy, can sometimes be a high barrier. Making sure that you're assessing folks' eligibility and also barriers to access to all of these resources in your initial meeting with the client or in your initial series of meetings to identify options early. Taking advantage of online applications when those are available. And then providing support for clients to take the next step of actually accessing the resources. So if you have time and resources available, going with clients to their first appointments. I just speaking from personal experience of accessing resources and government services, I don't go to the DMV until the very last minute when I have to, because I am intimidated by it. And I know that I shouldn't be. But I know that can sometimes only be amplified when folks aren't coming from the just incredible sense of arrogance and privilege that I come from in my day-to-day life, right? So the accompanying clients, and again, we know that there are barriers to that, staffing barriers, transportation barriers, but if that's possible, or walking through with the client, this is what it's going to be like, right? If you have actually been to that place before, what is it going to be like? And then a little bit less accessible now, but inviting folks from the programs that you're referring to meet with your clients in your space, to hold enrollment nights, drop-in hours, and then making sure you're tracking where resources are accessible remotely versus in person. And where things are more difficult to access remotely, being proactive in doing sort of internal problem solving, troubleshooting around that, and reaching out to partners who might be able to help. So another thing we've heard during the pandemic is that a lot of the things like application processes for benefits and things like that you might have been able to expedite by going in person, and that was a really successful strategy. It's a lot harder because all you can do now is submit an application online and wait months to hear back, or all you can do is call and wait for a call back. So if that's a persistent challenge, getting together with your agency or with your rapid rehousing provider community to say, okay, these are the challenges we're facing. What are other ways we can approach it? Or do we have contacts at the benefits office that we could reach out to and say, hey, this is what we're encountering. What are your options for coordination around those problems? Okay, and I'm seeing a question in the chat. Do you have guidance or advice for the level or length of supportive services for clients if their housing placement is located outside of San Mateo County? It's a good question. My very first response would be, just like clients placed inside of San Mateo County, the level and length of support should meet the client's needs, and should be flexible and targeted to the client's needs. I can sort of imagine where the question might be coming from, but I wonder, Tracy, do you want to follow up on that or provide any context for that question?
Thanks, Eli. I think it's maybe some of the things that we've heard from our providers, where the cost of housing in San Mateo County is very high compared to maybe some of our neighboring counties. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes the providers can only find options for their clients, let's say in like Alameda or Contra Costa County or Santa Clara County. Mm-hmm. But I know there are several things that change when you place somebody outside of the originating county. For example, I think you have to use like that jurisdiction's FMRs or mm-hmm. Stuff like that. And so just, I don't, in terms of support services, I don't believe HUD, prescribes any kind of, length or level of service if they're placed outside of our county, but maybe just kind of if we wanted to form some sort of policy to help our providers, and also just in terms of, investing our resources, but also making sure that we're serving the clients as best as we can.
It's a really great question, and specifically related to the federal funding, the ESG funding in particular, and also it's pretty similar for CoC expectations. It's a great question and a good topic to think about. I think the challenge is sort of placing folks out of county is related to the fact that there isn't really a different expectation or a separate expectation. There are some differences in, like, yes, you do use the FMR rates that apply in that county. You do your rent reasonableness assessment if that's, if it's a program that requires that based on that county. You have to identify resources that client is now eligible for because they're a resident of a different county. So you have to know that. But the sort of what you need, like, in order to place someone out of the county, you need to be confident that you're going to be able to provide the case management that the client's going to need for as long as they're going to need it. They're going to be able to connect them to resources that they need in that community, in that place. And so I think, like, the length of assistance should be the same, should be comparable. The types of supportive services and the depth of supportive services should be the same or comparable to what the client would be connected to in San Mateo County. That's the goal. That's the ideal answer. Is that responsive at all, or are there other aspects that you'd like to talk about?
No, that's very helpful. And I think I just, from a regulatory standpoint, I just wanted to make sure we're not rubbing up against something that's not allowed, whether in the ESG or CoC program regs for rapid
Mhm.
rehousing. But no, I think that's
Yeah.
really helpful guidance.
Yeah, that is the most important thing, I think. Like, but when you're talking to clients about options and when you're talking to clients about units outside of the county, is you do have the same responsibility under those funding streams to provide, like, to meet the client's needs as you've assessed them. And I know that can be challenging. One of the things that we have talked about with I think a couple agencies in San Mateo previously is, how do you, like, are there ways to get connected to specific other counties in the area? It might be worth, again, if you're placing a lot of clients in another county in the area and you want to know, like, how do we tie in, like, an initial, like, what's an email list we can get on in that community, or where do we go to find out what the resources are? Sometimes home base can help. We do work with a lot of Bay Area counties and a few sort of more outlying counties sort of beyond the East Bay. And so if you have questions like that, just send us the county names and say, hey, we're placing folks in these counties. What's the CoC? Where are they? What do they look like? What's the email address? We can sometimes help with that. Cool. All right. And I'm going to pass back to Bila for our last bit of presentation.
I'm just going to really quickly put our email address in the chat, our team email address, so that you can reach out to us if you have questions like that, or any questions really. And also our email address will be at the end of the slides as well. So we've talked a little bit about what you can do at move-in, right, when someone's moving into their housing, to help stabilize them. We've talked about what you can do sort of during the length of the program to help stabilize people. Now we're going to talk about the fact that, you know, throughout your client's program participation, you're going to want to assess how they're doing, identify issues, and sort of troubleshoot those issues that might put their housing at risk. And one way to do this is to look for signs of housing instability, some of the ones that we've mentioned here, and also signs of housing instability. And so sort of knowing how to identify these issues and address concerns is really going to help set your client up for the best possible chance of remaining in housing after the program supports end. So we're just going to take a couple minutes now to sort of look at some of these indications of stability that you're going to want to pay attention to kind of, you know, tell yourself, yes, this client's doing well. It seems like we're sort of winding down assistance and they're sort of on the road to success, or they're going for it. So obviously they're not in violation of the lease. They don't owe back rent. They have an ability to pay rent going forward, either because they've increased their income or they have connected to some other long-term subsidy. No material changes have occurred that would jeopardize their housing. There haven't been really any complaints from neighbors or the landlord, that kind of thing. One thing that's really important also is just, what is your client's perception of how they're doing? Do they feel like their crisis has ended? How stable and confident do they feel about how they're doing in housing? And really quickly, I just wanted to give people a chance to write in the chat if there are other indications of stability that we haven't listed here that you like to look for. Other things that you think tell you, yes, this client is ready to move on. I'm confident that, you know, they've benefited from the program, and you know, we're ready to wrap it up. So feel free to add those in the chat if you wish. Take a second. And it's possible that we did such a good job that they're all there, and that's fine too.
Possible but unlikely.
Possible but not likely. Yeah, okay, so client wants to donate to others and the program wants to volunteer. Yeah, that's a great one. That's a really great one. right? That says that they feel like they are confident, they feel like they have they've learned something or achieved something they want to give back, and have lessons that they can share with others. That's always a really, really great indication that people are doing well. Okay, I guess we can move on to the instability red flags then. Oh, here's another one. Client has savings in case of an emergency and reduced spending. Yes, yes. If a client has been able to save money, they have a little bit of a safety net, that's also a really, really good indication that that they're prepared to address any financial issues that might come up. That's great. Okay, so here we have some situations that should be red flags for you, an indication that your client, that their housing might be at risk. So for example, if they're being accused of violating the lease, they owe back rent, they're getting, you're fielding complaints from the landlord that there are issues in the unit, that the home is in poor condition when you visit, or the client is saying to you, really, I really need some more assistance. I don't think that I'm ready to end the program. I need more help, basically. So do you guys have any other red flags that you often see, or that you think are indications that your clients may be at risk of losing housing, that you like to kind of keep in the back of your mind? We'd love to hear those. The client is less responsive or engaged with case management. Yep. Yeah, they sort of fallen off the map, or not, coming to meetings, not returning calls, right? Dodges questions about employment verification. Yeah. Substance abuse. So perhaps if there's a new substance issue that's arisen for them, something along those lines. Yeah. Feel free to keep adding those to the chat. So we are, with some of these in mind, we are going to do a little activity, and we're going to turn to you all to help us brainstorm ideas for how would you work with your client to address some of these red flags. And to do this, we're going to use a really kind of fun online tool called a Jamboard. And it's sort of like a, Eli is really excited about it.
Jamming.
It's jamming. It's sort of like an online whiteboard, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Give me 1 second here. Da-da-da. All right, so what you're going to want to do is click on the Jamboard link and open that up. Oh, lease violations, yes. Sorry, someone else brought up more red flags. So others living in the home, people going in and out, complaints from neighbors. Yes, exactly. Exact kind of thing that we're talking about. Okay, so the Jamboard link is in the chat now. So if everyone could go ahead and join the Jamboard, that would be great. If for some reason you're having issues joining the Jamboard, let us know. We can always put things on the Jamboard for you. And also I think Eli's going to share his screen so that those of you who can't join the Jamboard can follow along and sort of like watch what's going on. Okay, and so the way this is going to work is we have set up this little kind of whiteboard here with different issues that may arise, different kind of like red flags that you might see. And what we would like for you to do is click on the sticky note, which is sort of on the left-hand side. I think Eli's kind of showing you, it's like sort of in the middle. So it's a sticky note, right? And what you're gonna do is fill in this board. So for example, let's see, the first, so client breaching lease by having pets. So one issue you could do is talk to, sort of go through lease with client to educate them. Okay, so I'm gonna say you could go through the lease with the client to educate them. And I'm gonna plonk that right there. And you can do as many of these as you want. And we invite you to put them under whatever issue you're interested in sharing about. Just talking about what would you do in this situation to sort of address and strategize around this issue. So we're going to take a couple minutes now, and we invite you to go ahead.
Yeah. All right, and all your Post-its are probably going to show up in the same spot to begin with, and you can move them around. I see you guys are figuring that out. You can change the color if you want. And as you put them on, we can read some of them out.
Yeah, so this is really great. So with the client, you know, with the landlord saying the client's breaching the lease, yeah, you can do the sort of education, remind them like, hey, you know, remember this lease says that you can't have a pet, that's a violation. Ask them if the pet is an emotional support animal. That's excellent, right? Like you never know if there could be some way to allow the pet to stay, assist with getting the pet certified as a companion, even a service animal. Yes, all of these things. Really, really great ideas. So if your client's behind on the rent, getting a payment plan and connecting them with resources to help pay the back rent. Yep. Assisting with additional employment resources, maybe some referrals to places. Yep. Talk to the landlord about a payment plan, mediation. They might be eligible for rental assistance through one of the core agencies, right? Help pay that back rent, get them back on track. Yep, some of those COVID-19 specific programs might, there might be a reason, maybe they lost their job due to COVID-19 or something like that, they might be eligible. Yeah, and the landlord receiving noise complaints from neighbors. Yeah, talk to your client, try to find out what's going on. Some landlords target, so maybe the landlord is in the wrong. Maybe the landlord is being unreasonable and your client is not being noisy, just trying to get to the bottom of what's happening. Talk about some strategies for timing activities, right? So let's say that let's say they're in a Grateful Dead jam band and they need to change their band practice to 12 p.m. on a Sunday instead of 12 a.m. on a Sunday. Right, see if there are quiet hours, try to find out like what exactly is the rub with regard to when the noise is happening, what does the lease say? Yeah, this is all really, really great. Yeah, remind them about the quiet hours. Yeah, and if the client's behind on rent, maybe their income has changed, try to figure that out. Try to complete a budget sheet. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and I really like the range of approaches here and the things that you're capturing, like ask the client if everything is okay, because on the one hand, it could be just the landlord is targeting this client and you want to address that. Or it could just be the client needs to work out when they're doing loud things, but it could be this is indicating something, the client is in distress of some kind, the client is in some kind of crisis, whatever that is. So checking it.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so we are going to go on now to the next page. So if you all want to go up to the top and use the arrow to go to the next frame. here are some other potential scenarios that that you might need to strategize about. Go for it.
Does everybody see the second Jamboard board? Seeing some nods.
There we go. Now we're jamming. So when if the client is developing a hoarding problem, that's something that we hear a lot about, unfortunately, that folks sometimes have hoarding issues, and that can put their housing at risk for various reasons. So one thing you can do is support your client with getting more organized and prioritizing things need versus want. Yeah, looking for I think this is behavioral health resources, and discussing potential consequences, impacts. People might not be aware that this is something that could potentially cause them to lose their housing. They think, this is my unit, I can do whatever I want in my unit. Well, sometimes hoarding can have issues that spread outside of the unit, et cetera. So yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, connect to resources. Yes, a lot of hoarding often has underlying mental health conditions that, maybe perhaps they could seek treatment for. Okay, client's disability benefits application denied. Huge fan of Department of Rehabilitation. Literally help people find jobs within their limitations. Yes, we are also a big fan of them. They do really great work. Seek local legal aids who can assist with benefits access. Yes, sometimes people successfully appeal these benefits denials. Definitely legal services referral could be great for that. Client not following through with referrals. Remind client that they need to meet the advocate halfway. Work to ensure access, competency with communication tools. I'd be curious to hear more from the person who wrote that, if you're comfortable just elaborating more on what you mean by that, because I think I know, but I'm not sure. I wonder if that has to do with access to like technology, perhaps, or maybe the client's communication capabilities. Either way, could be something useful to work on. Providing some examples of successful referrals. Yeah, I really like that. Talking to people about perhaps scenarios where you referred someone to something and it made a big difference for the person, or maybe that client would even be interested in talking to your client about their experience with a particular program or referral. Setting a time to have a meeting and go through referrals together. Yeah, creating a task sheet. Yeah, these are all really, really, really great. Awesome ideas. Great, so I think we're gonna now move on to the last board. One more set of brainstorming. I'm gonna add one.
Board number 3.
Yes, board number 3.
Ah.
Yeah, so sometimes clients will come to you and they will have, some period of sobriety under their belt. Could be a long time, could be a short time, but a relapse is something that, can really derail folks, as we all know, in housing, can cause a cascade of issues. If they're actively using, perhaps that's a different thing, but I think there's something specifically destabilizing about having gotten sober and then having a relapse that can be particularly tough for people. Working on a treatment plan, getting connected to their sponsor, reaching out to those social supports for sure. Working with them to rebuild their support system and find out what the trigger was for the relapse. Support. Yes. Support them to getting to a meeting if that's what they need to do for their support. Yeah. All really, really great stuff. Making sure the client is safe and ask if they're interested in resources to work towards sobriety again. Yeah, putting the ball in their court. Are you interested in getting back in there and trying to work on your sobriety again, for sure. Client loses job, sending links to job applications, for sure. Applying EDD benefits. Yeah. Explore what caused the job loss. So you can connect them with an employment specialist. That's great. Moving on to if the client feels unsafe in the unit after a DV incident, safety planning with the client. Relocating a client to safe housing until they feel that they can find new housing. I think another one that's really important is referring a client if they want to, asking the client if they want a referral to a specific domestic violence service provider can be really, really helpful as well. Temporary restraining order if they want. Yeah, all good stuff. Great. Well, thank you all so much for participating in this activity. I hope you've learned a little bit from each other about different things that you can do to address some of these red flags and hopefully get in there and get your client sort of restabilized so that these issues don't impact their housing. So thank you so much. And we'll leave the Jamboard up if you guys want to continue playing around with it or having a look at it, taking screenshots, whatever.
Yeah, and it can stay up even when the training is over. It's not linked to our Zoom meeting, so it's there. And the link is in, you can grab the link from the chat. You can revisit that anytime. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to go back to our PowerPoint. Oops. Oh, sorry, folks. 1 second. Okay. So while I'm sorting out the screen share, actually, I'm going to ask that. Never mind. I got it. Okay. So we're going to do a couple, I think two additional activities that are focused on not just that, we were looking specifically at problem solving disruptions and problem solving when you're seeing these red flags of instability. We're going to step back and take our sort of global picture of housing stability again. And we're going to look back at some of the sort of strategy and focus areas we went over in the presentation. So things like, what are you doing at move-in? What are you doing to help support the client after move-in to build that long-term stability? We're going to do this through a little bit of a self-check. It's a reflection activity that you're going to be doing independently on your own. So as just a preview of what this might feel like, right? We're on a Zoom meeting. We don't have you in a room, so I can't be sort of casually checking out who's diligently working on their worksheet. I can't be walking behind your desk and tapping on the table like an obnoxious high school teacher if you're not working on your worksheet. But I think the second part of the activity when we do peer sharing is going to be a lot more rich and a lot more helpful if you all are working on your worksheet. So it shouldn't be too much of a burden that we're asking of you. So I'm gonna put a link to this, or I'm not gonna put a link. I'm going to drop the actual file, a Word document file, in the Zoom chat. And I will do that now, actually. Right. Oops. No, I'm going to do a link. I'm not going to do the actual file. All right. So in the chat is a link to a Word document. You should be able to click the link. It'll open in a browser window, and there should be a download button or a download option for this file. And that'll get you a Word doc version, which will be helpful. So this worksheet is going to go over some of the housing stability strategies and areas that we've been talking about. This is what the worksheet is going to look like when you download it. The first step of the worksheet, step 1, is to just walk through each of these statements. So A, preparing for bumps in the road, for example, identifying potential challenges, crisis planning, whatever that looks like. Does your agency or program do this? Yes or no? And if you're not sure, that's fine. You don't have to answer if you just don't have that information. But if you know, yes, we do this in some way, no, we don't, you're just gonna check the box and then make some notes for yourself about how do you do this? What does it look like? This doesn't have to be an essay. It's not something anybody else is ever gonna read unless you give it to them. We're not gonna collect this. We're not gonna make you share it. We're not gonna make you read it aloud. So these are notes for you. You're just doing a reflection, right? And you go through each of these statements, tenant education and supports to ensure lease client. Do you do it? What does that look like in your program or across your agency? There are about 6 of these statements. You're just going to do that to begin with. That's the first step. The second step, the end here, is pick at least one. You can think about more if you want, but at least one of those statements, one of those areas that you think you'd like your agency or your program to do differently, or you're not doing it really, and you want to start doing it. And make some notes about that. Reflect on it, make some notes. So that's the worksheet activity. It's the reflection activity. Are there any, before I ask you to start working on that, are there any questions about that? And let me know, has anybody not able to download that Word document? Let me know if you don't have the Word document. Okay. Feel free to come off mute or chat me. I'm gonna put on my timer for 5 minutes. Please don't leave the Zoom, stay on. In 5 minutes, I'm gonna check back in and ask you, like, are you ready? Anybody need more time? Okay, but for the next 5 minutes, this is your time to work through that reflection activity. Okay, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to check in. Could everybody write in the chat either a yes, you'd like a couple more minutes, or a no, you don't want a couple more minutes? Just a yes or a no for a couple more minutes to work through this reflection. Seeing one no, yes or no, 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 okay. All right, so I'm seeing a few people respond, and all of our responders are saying no. Anybody who needs more time, feel free to speak up. You can message me directly if you want. Okay. Then let's move to the next piece of this. I'm going to get my share back up. So first of all, I want to get a sense, either in the chat, or you can come off mute if you like, of how was that as a reflection? Just generally, how was it? Did you reflect, discover something interesting about your program? Were you really pleased and really proud of how your program is operating? Anybody, you don't have to share what it was, but did anybody identify something that they might want to work on?
Hi, this is Jacqueline from Life Moves.
Hey.
So I think I really like that exercise in reflecting. I'm realizing that I think that our team probably does do a lot of these things, but it's not super formalized. And so exploring ways that maybe we might be more intentional about it, and that could possibly help improve outcomes for our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Just to piggyback off of that, I'm noticing, so I have a new grant in the city of San Jose, and just noticing the differences. And so I'm learning a lot from the city of San Jose, and I'm starting to incorporate those trainings, with San Mateo as well. And so, yeah, definitely focusing on more areas where we can improve on. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else have reflections on the reflection? Awesome. Yeah, and I really liked the point about, I mean, always the standardizing, the making sure, all the good things are happening with every client every time in a way that where staff feel supported is a fantastic gold standard goal, and can be really hard to achieve, but is always good to work towards. And then I really like the point about even internally, if there are multiple funding sources for rapid rehousing within your organization and multiple different projects, just checking in, like, are we siloing our staff? Are we giving folks an opportunity to talk about what we're learning in this program that can be translated to that program? Just like we try to do at these trainings when we do that peer sharing piece. So one of the things that you could do, we're not going to do this in the training right now, but a way that you could use this reflection sheet or a similar activity is taking this, like comparing notes with other folks at your agency. If there are multiple people from your program on the call, find 5 minutes, 10 minutes to just compare, like, what do you think, what are we doing well? And did you identify anything you'd like to do better? Because it's, it's not going to be one person taking it on their back to change how the program operates. You're going to work as a team. So this sort of optional agency sharing piece, you could find some time to compare notes on that activity. All right, so as our final activity, we're going to do, as I've been mentioning, a little more peer sharing. And again, taking this broad view of housing stability, all of those same topics that you just reflected on the worksheet: move-in support, crisis, well, crisis planning, lease compliance education, a lot of the topics you just reflected on, a lot of the topics we presented on the beginning slides, peer support, increasing income, COVID-specific resources and challenges, remote case management, legal support. I want to know, so of these topics, is there one topic or a couple of topics that you would be interested in hearing from your colleagues about on this call, right? So I'm going to ask you to identify in your head and then in the chat, of these topics, which ones would you like to hear more about from the other people on the call? So maybe if I can use Morgan as an example, Morgan, maybe over at Life Moves, you'd really like to hear about how other folks are building in peer support structures, right? How are other programs doing this? So Morgan could type peer support in the chat. And then we're going to do our last activity based on the topics that you all identify. So I'm going to give you a minute to just pick. You can pick one, you can type 4, you can say all of them, but just whatever you would be interested in hearing. And then we'll see what are the most frequent, what are the most common. So I'm seeing crisis planning, remote case management. Go ahead and put those in the chat. I'm going to give you maybe 30 seconds to think through that, type it in the chat, and then we'll see where we are. All right, so I see move in support, remote case management, okay. Lease compliance education, move in support, increasing income, always, okay. All right, go ahead and identify in the chat the things you're interested in. Even if someone else has already said it, say it again so we know that there's a lot of demand for that particular topic. Okay. Oh, and I'm getting a couple chats just to me. My timer's very loud. See crisis planning. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with crisis planning. I've seen that a couple times. And then a little bit about remote case management. And if we have time, we'll get into the crisis planning, remote case management. If we have time, we'll get into the lease compliance education. Okay. Viola, am I sharing my screen?
Yes.
Great. All right. So crisis planning. Folks who are willing to share, and I encourage you all to be brave and speak up. What are the things that you are doing around crisis planning with your clients? And just like on the Jamboard activity, share your thoughts. Don't limit yourself to just the stuff you think is like really superstar excellent. Tell us the basic stuff you're doing too, so we can get a good board here of strategies. So what are you doing with clients to plan for future potential crises? You put it in the chat, you say it out loud. Yes, you will get a copy of the PowerPoint. The more you pay in, the more you'll get out.
This is Sabrina from Abode. I feel like it's definitely something that I learned I need to help out with in the front end, because it's become a crisis in the long run, which is helping them set up like utilities, PG&E bills, water bills, whatever it is that they're responsible for. Because in the past, especially folks that I thought maybe were a little bit more independent, I left it to them to do that. And then 6 months down the line, the landlord's like, hey, your client owes me $1,000 because they never switched over the PG&E or something. So
yeah,
it's I feel like it's small things like that, because you can't really plan for big, you know, big things, life happens. So for me, it's always like, I tend to see it being like small things. And so, you know, it's preventable, I guess, because we can catch it in the beginning.
Yeah, for sure.
This is Eve with Life Moves. So I think doing a budget sheet at first with your case management would prevent for that type of a crisis kind of with the utilities. But I also feel like doing an immediate housing search once we've housed them, because it is rapid rehousing. Sometimes we're housing them in a place where they may not be able to afford it at the end of the program. So I think that housing search and putting them on wait lists and subsidy lists is really important. I was very surprised when we got into our program that the clients that I picked up didn't have any of that. So they're like all close to ending their program and they are in crisis.
Right. Yeah, just as other folks are thinking about what they might want to share, I want to share some. So I've been looking at some of the existing national data and research about rapid rehousing outcomes, and things that studies that HUD has pulled together that cover a broad national sort of data set, and then a bunch of local studies that have been published together. And one of the things that I've noticed is that how rapid rehousing is implemented really affects the outcomes. Program design is important, but housing market is also incredibly important. And on the one hand, we see with rapid rehousing, typically really good exits to permanent housing as a whole, and pretty strong, like pretty low returns to the system if we look at who's coming back to homeless serving programs. But what we don't see from rapid rehousing is clients staying in the unit that they were assisted in for a very long time, right? We don't see that, yes, this is the unit that the client's going to stay in for the next 20 years. We continue to see for clients, even that are not returning to homelessness, that clients move. And that is part of, I think, the rapid rehousing can end homelessness for individual clients, but rapid rehousing can't address the economic and housing market factors that cause homelessness and housing instability, and can't solve all of those things for our clients. So just wanted to share that because it's something I've been thinking about recently. The difference between housing stability remaining housed and housing stability remaining in this particular unit. So yeah, sort of a tangent, but getting on affordable housing wait lists, and even working with the client to prepare for the next time you move, the next time you do a housing search, if you're doing it on your own, what does that look like? Okay, I'll stop talking. What else? What other stuff are you all doing for crisis planning? Put it in the chat or say it out loud.
Amal, this is Eve again with Life Moves. So one of the things that we do is that we have a program called Connect. So once we close out a client, they don't feel like they've been totally dropped off without any type of case management. And that's something that I'm really proud of, because, you know, I had a few of my clients go like, well, you're closing me out. What am I going to do? And I'm just like, wait a minute, somebody from Connect's going to contact you. You know, always have my number. There'll always be that support. So I think that it's important to know that you have that connection, and that they know that if they need something, that they can always fall back on something like that.
Yeah, that who do you contact if you have a housing crisis? Who are you going to be in touch with? Gina has a question. Has anybody come up with a crisis planning approach for people placed remotely who do not like the new area? Is that a challenge other folks have seen, where they're placing people in another county and the client is not comfortable with the neighborhood or the new area?
Yes, we have our fair share. Sorry, if you can't hear me. So what we created in our team, when we move individuals out of county, you're setting a whole, it's not necessarily you're sending them, you introduce the area to them, they decided that they wanted to move to this area. But what we like to do is send them off with, resources, where their local core agency is, where their local food bank is, things in their community that they'll need, this extra support. Because a lot of people, as we know, they love fleeing to San Mateo County because of the services, and so when you displace them or when you move them out of county, they're starting, from scratch, they're starting from brand new. So, definitely supporting them with these services, utilities, water, garbage, whatever it may be, these simple things for, us, maybe, something new to them. So that's my suggestion.
Any other thoughts? Strikes me that another piece of this might be just remoteness from, like, the distance from the people that the client knows, the maybe social networks that they already have. So really talking proactively, thinking ahead about what social connections the client wants. Yeah. So like I would think like thinking about that ahead of time, talking to the client, how is it going to feel if you're this far away? Yes, you can afford it here, know what that's going to mean. And also, like we said, like what are the places that client might find new social connections, whether that's an identity group, a faith group, sort of support group of some kind. Okay. Any other thoughts? All right, really quick, I want to see if we can get some thoughts on remote case management. So, rapid fire, what are you doing? Anybody who's doing anything? Okay, yeah, so in-person visits. FaceTime, yeah, using those masks, outside meetings, phone or Zoom. Yep, we know that, things that require a physical computer might be challenging, but depending on where clients are, if they have access to Wi-Fi, a phone option, a FaceTime, a Zoom on the phone, visits with masks. All right. Yeah, the remote case management piece, we do find that a lot of providers really are asking for resources on this, and one of the things that I find is there may just not be a better way. There may just not be a sort of silver bullet way of doing it. It sounds like you all are, from what we've heard at TA visits, you all are meeting in person when you can still, you're taking advantage of outside meetings, sometimes some folks are even doing client peer groups outside and doing the phone and the FaceTime. Some of the things we think about with remote case management are things like, can you talk to the client about how they feel about the remote case management, what they're comfortable with, where they are when they're talking to you, that might impact what they're sharing. Are there like safe confidential spaces that they can be in? Is it unnerving to have you be a voice on the phone? So having explicit conversations about things like that. All right, thank you so much for joining us for this training. I know that we sort of covered a lot of ground here, but I hope we gave you some time for that peer sharing and the reflection, which I think is really valuable. We will be sharing the slides, or we'll be sharing the slides with HSA, and they'll send it out to you as usual. And Bila has put a link to the feedback survey in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind, we would be incredibly grateful if you would take just a minute to fill out that survey in SurveyMonkey. We absolutely change how we deliver these trainings based on the constructive input that we get. So we really appreciate you all filling that out. If you have some time now would be great, or anytime today or tomorrow. So thank you all. We will let you go. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thanks so much, Eli and Viola and everyone.
Yep.
Take care.
Thanks, Lodi. See y'all.